Moving forward, we got to the bridge, and I felt like the bridge was okay at the beginning because it's a distinct change.
He is the head of the body, the church, the firstborn in him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell through him, bringing all things back to himself.
That's fine, but now the second half has got to be big, and it does get bigger because the bass comes back in and the drums change up, but I felt like it wasn't big enough. So I added a few things. I brought back in the tambourine. I added some hand claps that I recorded, and I'll give you the secret to that in a second. I added some gang vocals, 8 passes of me singing along with Cameron. So you can hear what that sounds like.
He is the head of the body, the church, the firstborn in him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell through him, bringing all things back to himself.
And a little harmony at the end. Okay, so if you take away the gang vocals and the claps, here's what the repeat sounds like.
He is the head of the body, the church, the firstborn in him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell through.
Right, it's already a little bigger because the bass and drums change, but it's not nearly as big as this.
He is the head of the body, the church, the firstborn in him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell through him, bringing all things back to himself.
Way more interesting, way more energy, way more excitement. It makes the bridge worth repeating. Otherwise, it's just a repeat with the bass and the drums back in. So how did I do this? This is sort of a little freebie for you. If you're going to do gang vocals, do at least 8. That's just a rule of thumb that's worked for me. You could get away with 4, but it won't sound quite the same. What I'm doing here is this is what they sound like by themselves.
He is the head of the body, the church, the firstborn in him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell through him, bringing all things back to himself.
Okay, it's just 8 of me, right? So it's great if you have other vocalists in the band or other people. You can all get together around a microphone and do it ideally. And I've done this before. I'll set up a mic, get 4 of us, the whole band, even if they can't sing that well. It's almost better. And we get in an arc around the mic, and we put on headphones, and we just sing together the pass. And if you have 4 people at once, then you only need to do 2 of these or 3 of these. But if it's just you, then what I did is literally sang it 8 times really quickly from 8 different points in my room. So I kept the mic in one spot, and I would back up a little bit than I typically would for the lead vocal. So it's more ambient, a little less clarity, a little more reverberant. And then I sang the pass through once in front of the mic. And then I shifted off axis to the side of the mic a little bit, sang a pass. Then on the other side of the microphone, sang a pass. Then I'll do it again, only sometimes I will cup my hands over my mouth. So I'll take my hands and make like wedges on the side of my mouth so it kind of changes the EQ of my voice. You can even hear it right now. It's like you're yelling, you're like, hey, across the street, and you put your hands up to your face. If you do that in front of the mic, it changes the tone that the mic hears. It's funny. It's uncanny. It makes more mid-rangey vocal. So I'll layer a couple of those. And then I did a couple passes down an octave just to get my voice to sound a little bit different parts of the room, different distances from the mic, putting my hands up to my face, doing an octave down. That way they all sound slightly different, which is cool. So you can kind of hear, take off this. Here is one.
He is the head of the body, the church.
Pretty far away. Here's another.
He is the head of the body, the church.
Those are both far away. These are octave lower.
He is the head of the body, the church.
but I'm closer to the mic. Same thing on this one.
He is the head of the body, the church.
These were a little bit closer.
He is the head of the body, the church. He is the head of the body, the church.
That's where my hands are on my face.
He is the head of the body, the church.
And then this one.
He is the head of the body, the church.
And together they really sound cool.
He is the head of the body, the church, the firstborn.
You get some variance, you get some slight sloppiness, and that's what sounds huge. So I would do at least 8 of those and actually record them and vary your position around the room. And then the claps is the kind of the same concept. I basically decided that I wanted there to be actual claps mimicking the drum beat on the snares. So I basically mimic the snare because the snare goes like this. If you listen to the beat. Boom, cat, 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 cat. That's what I wanted to mimic with the claps. So literally, I just pulled out the same microphone and I took my hands and I clapped to the beat 8 different times in different ways. Sometimes I would cup my hands, sometimes I would smack them, and together they sound cool. If you hear them sound cut off, it's because I did a strip silence. I took out all the silence in between them. And so it sounds pretty relatively big. If you just, if you solo one clap, well, let's just solo this one that's up the middle. That doesn't sound cool. So when you think of claps, even if it's a clap loop, those are layered claps. So I could bounce all this down to one stereo track and it would sound really cool. It would sound like a bunch of people clapping. It's the variance in timing and the variance in tone of the claps that make it sound audibly bigger. It's the same concept as the gang vocal. So taking these elements away is huge. If you take away the claps, you kind of lose something.
Head of the body, the church, the firstborn in him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell through him, bringing all things back to himself.
The claps reinforce what the drums are doing, and the same thing with the tambourine. If you take away the tambourine and the claps, you realize you lose a lot.
Head of the body, the church, the firstborn in him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell through him, bringing all things back to himself.
Just energy, interest, right? Very simple things. These only took me a few minutes to do. In fact, if the claps aren't thick enough for you, you could literally double them again by taking the second half of the pass and copying that and placing it on 8 more tracks alongside the first half of the pass. Then you'd have 16 tracks of clapping, at least for those 4 bars, and then I could copy those 4 bars. You could thicken it up even more. So claps, tambourine, gang vocal, and then even the harmony at the very end, just to emphasize that last line.
Him bringing all things back to himself.
Just keep that energy pushed all the way through to the turn. At this point, it drops out, which is cool. We already added the acoustic guitar, which just was another sweetening thing we were doing in the arrangement phase to keep this part interesting.
He is before all things. He is before all things.
And Cameron sang this down an octave, which is nice, and I just added it up an octave quietly.
He is before all things. He is before all things.
Right? Because I felt like it needed a little something. And then we're in the final chorus. I brought back harmonies And then I also brought back, I copied and pasted one of the lead guitar parts from verse 2 to bring that back as like a little encore to what it was doing in the verse.
He is before all things. In him all things sewn together. He is before all things. In him all things sewn together. You are before.
Right? So that way this chorus is still slightly different. Like in the mix, I probably would feature this little part a little bit more. Probably bring it out of the mix a bit more. And make sure it stands out so people remember it and hear it. So that way they go, oh yeah, I love that part. But now they're playing it over a different part. So it sounds different. The vibe's different. But then the final half of the chorus, at the very end, it was big, but not big enough. So I brought back the organ, brought back the acoustic guitar, which I muted some of it because I didn't actually like it, but I kept that in because I like the strumming pattern. His lead guitar comes back in, but then on the sweetening side of things, I re-recorded some gang vocals for this section because the lyrics change. I thought that gang vocals needed to just sing along with Cameron's lead vocal. And he already had the end vocal, which I showed you. So I doubled that, and I added the gang vocals, added the organ, the acoustic guitar, and it really brought this final chorus home.
You are before all things. In you all things sewn together. You are before all things. In you all things sewn together.
Right? Just the final bit of energy. This is the last time you're hearing the chorus. This should be the biggest time, you know? So I brought in the gang vocals. There was no gang vocals previously in a chorus, and that made a huge difference.
You are before all things. In you all things sewn together. You are before all things. In you all things sewn together.
And, you know, I had the tambourine in there as well because that really became a paramount part of the choruses. Just the energy's always got to be there now. Kept that into the intro and then to the outro, excuse me. And it ends pretty much the way we had it before with the guitars. There you go. Sweetening. Hopefully it gives you some insight into how I view that process. And I even think like this on mixing, and I've talked about this, but I think like this on mixing. And I always wish the band would have done this on the recording phase, because if you brought me a song that was recorded up until this video that didn't have the sweetening, it would be okay. And I think we could get a good mix out of it, but I'd have to do something in the mix to make every moment interesting. But if you took the extra time, the extra half day to think through a pad or an organ, something that's like a sustaining piece, you know, not like necessarily piano, which it's rhythmic. This is just like a sustaining. Sometimes a pad is nice, a synth, an organ, a keyboard that you hold some chords, some strings, adding those elements, adding percussive elements like tambourine or shakers or claps, layering gang vocals or triples or doubles, layering harmonies or extra vocal parts, muting parts, bringing parts back from another piece, etc., etc. That is how you keep the song engaging start to finish. And the only way to know if it's done is if you can go from intro to outro systematically like we just did and not feel let down. Does that make sense? You go through it, and every time a new section comes, if you're slightly let down or if the energy went away, then you're not done sweetening. That needs something. That's a big indicator that something is missing. But once you can get through each part of the song from start to finish, it feels right in terms of there's something new to grab your attention and something new to fill that little void as the listener, then you know you're on the right track, and then you know you can be done with sweetening. And you could always come up with new parts. That's not the goal here. You don't want to do this forever. You just want to make sure that every section of every song continues to push the listener forward. Direct them like a good director of a movie. Direct their ears to where you want them to hear, and send them on a journey from start to finish. If you can do this, I promise you, your recordings will virtually mix themselves. This is a huge part of it. It has nothing to do with sonics. It has everything to do with arrangement. And arrangement is the secret.